everyone, and welcome to Real PR with me, Fiona Scott. I hope you're having a good day, week, month. Today we're going to share loads of insights with entrepreneur Matthew Stafford. I've never met Matthew, but I'm going to find out a ton about him today, as you are too. So let's get into it. Hello Matthew, welcome. Please introduce yourself.
Good morning. Nice to see you. Great to be here. Yeah, I'm Matthew Stafford. I am the founder of something called Nine Others, which is a global network of entrepreneurs that I started with my co-founder Katie Lewis back up in 2011. And it's very, very simple. It's grown to be quite a large network, and lots of interesting things come from that.
Matthew, there's a ton of places you and I can start finding out about each other. So I'm just going to say, I know through reading a bit of blurb about you that you had or have an association with what three words? Now, this is something I use in my private life when we're traveling around in our caravan, for example. So just let's start the conversation. Tell us about that.
I'd be delighted to. I love those guys. I love What Three Words. So yes, and I'm even coincidentally, I didn't know you were going to say that, but coincidentally wearing one of my What Three Words t-shirts today. I love a bit of startup merch, and yeah, I'm always trying to represent the companies that I get to know. So yes, What Three Words is an addressing mapping startup that I first met the week they launched in 2013. And for anyone who doesn't know, what they've done is they've split the world up into 3 meter by 3 meter squares, and each 3 meter square can be identified by three ordinary dictionary words. So it sounds a bit odd, a bit obscure. And in those early days in 2013, it probably was. But there's a long story as to why the CEO came up with that idea. He was trying to get people in random places all around the world, and he tried, GPS coordinates. Some places don't have addresses, so it would be like, well, turn left on the lane just past the tree, and he was trying to organize getting musicians to various sites, and it turned into a nightmare. So he thought there must be a simpler way. So he got together with with a friend of his, and anyway, they figured out that actually you could identify a 3 meter square with three ordinary words. So where I'm sitting right now might be, table, lamp, spoon. Where you're sitting will be three different words. And it's it can be quite useful in the UK, where we've got, postcodes and house numbers. It's quite easy to find my house. It's got a number, got the postcode, obviously, so that's not too much of an issue. But yeah, if you're traveling around the countryside, or you live in an area where the postcode is quite big, but it's not easy to find the front door, what three words can get you to the exact 3 meters by 3 meters. So it's that kind of addressing infrastructure. But then also, the emergency services use it. So, if you climb a mountain and you fall over and break your leg, you can phone up the mountain rescue, tell them your 3 words, and they'll know exactly where you are. So it's that sort of thing. And like I say, I was introduced to Chris Sheldrick, one of the founders and the CEO, back in the spring of 2013, when they were launching this. And he came to a few Nine Others dinners in a row in those early days. Um, just because What Three Words is a bit, it's a bit obscure. It takes a bit of explaining. Does it click with people? Does it not? All this kind of stuff. And he also wanted to connect to lots of different people. So, we got on. I loved what he was doing. He came to a few dinners to get that feedback from other founders. Um, I mean, I just loved it from day one. I ended up sitting in their offices for quite a bit in 20 end of 2013, 2014, trying to help them out. And have helped here and there, along the way, and continue to be a supporter.
So explain then what your organization offered Chris, just as one example, in those early days. What did you bring to the table for him?
So Nine Others is really simple, and I'll explain a bit about what that is, and I'm happy to, I can go into the background and why the idea came up. But Nine Others is simply that I host a dinner for 10 people, so it's yourself and nine others. So it's deliberately small, loosely curated. So what we want to do is invite founders of companies, entrepreneurs, people who work in startups to come to dinner. And the kind of format of Nine Others is that each person shares a challenge. So they share what's keeping them up at night. That's what we ask everybody at every dinner. What's keeping you up at night? And then for 10, 15 minutes, the rest of the people around the table try to help out, try to help out. So they might ask further questions. They might offer stories that from their own experiences or from people that they've heard of, or you should maybe read this book, or you should maybe connect with that person. When I did this, it went horribly wrong. When I did this, it went, this is what worked, all that kind of stuff. So it's all, it's all around the dinner table, those kind of conversations. And we do that for each person in turn. It's Chatham House rules. So what's shared around the table is confidential around the table. And there's no hierarchy. So there's no, people don't come along to Nine Others to find out the answer from some guru or another, because what we've seen is that people, running these early stage startups, they're doing things for the first time. They're doing new things. Even if they're experiencing common challenges, they may be experiencing them for the first time themselves. So there's not one right answer. So it's about coming along, sharing that challenge, being open to receiving, lots of different candid feedback. And then, we want the Nine Others dinner to be kind of the kickoff to them building those relationships with the other people around the table, but then also lots of other people who are in the network and who we might be able to connect people with. And just to really reflect on it and reflect on their challenge and the feedback that they were given, and then think about it and take a step forward. So it's kind of that, group problem solving for founders, which we've been doing, and now been doing that for, it'll be 14 years this year.
How did that come about then, Matthew? Where did that idea come from?
Well, so Katie and I, that I run it with, we were working for investment companies in 2010, 2011. at at that time in London where we were, it was kind of like the beginning of this latest wave of entrepreneurship. There were some people, starting companies. iPhone had come out, apps were coming out. There was this sort of the beginning of this latest wave of entrepreneurship, and we were part of a project to help those companies get investment. And it was a fantastic project. It was government backed. They just wanted to have more entrepreneurs, raising investment, understanding what investment meant, getting the right kind of investment for their company, and then hopefully growing that company, employing more people, making more money for the investors, and just having that kind of growth. So we were working on that project, and as part of that, I came up with the idea of doing dinners for these entrepreneurs to meet investors. So there were investors in London and elsewhere that we knew, were ready, willing, and able to invest in these startup companies. There were the startup companies that had either, received a bit of training from us, a bit of investment readiness from us, or they were kind of already, at the right stage to get some investment. So we hosted a bunch of dinners throughout 2011, and the founders would pitch. They would get 2 minutes to share what they were up to. There'd be a bit of Q&A, and then we'd go to the next person and we'd go around the table like that with the investors in the room. So that was all great, and they were massively successful. It was absolutely fantastic. Great series of dinners and a great project to be part of. But what happened at the end of every single dinner with lots of different entrepreneurs was that they would huddle together in a corner and they would talk amongst themselves for the last 20, 30 minutes of the evening. And it used to really annoy us because we'd got them there to talk to the investors. We'd made a lot of effort. We got these investors in and they were huddled together amongst themselves. And we thought, you can do that anytime. That's complete, you're wasting your opportunity by not talking to the investors after the dinner. But like I say, it happened often enough with enough different people that we figured there must be something going on. And what was going on was that those founders were talking to each other, their peers, about the everyday business challenges that they had, that they kind of they couldn't really talk about them anywhere else, because at every other event, including the ones I was running, everything had to be brilliant, and they were always in pitch mode, and everything was going, wonderfully well. But actually, they were having to chase invoices, or they were having to, you know, get fire people. They were making employment offers, but people weren't taking them up on it. All these different kinds of ordinary business of business problems. So Katie and I thought, okay, that's interesting. You know, could we do something to help those guys out, to help those founders out? And we'd done a bunch of dinners, so we thought, well, what if we did a dinner just for the founders, and then we could talk about those problems, and then maybe those founders could help each other out and have the network help the network. So that was kind of the beginnings of it. And then, you know, we were thinking about this towards the end of 2011, and you know, the next thing was it's pretty simple to test that idea. So Katie and I put on a dinner. We hosted a dinner. We invited a bunch of people that we knew would give us robust feedback. And we said, look, this is our idea. You know, would this be interesting to anybody? And then went around the table and heard all of that feedback. And, you know, some of it clicked with us, some of it didn't. Um, but we thought, okay, I think this could be something that we could do. So the following month, we put on, you know, more of a proper Nine Others dinner, and they've run the same way ever since.
So how, if you excuse me asking you this, Matthew, how do you make money from it, or how do you at least cover your costs? You know, what are you doing to pay your bills, you and Katie?
Well, I mean, at the time, again, some of these are by design, some of these are sort of happy accidents. But at the time, we were both in full-time jobs working for these investors, and those full-time jobs were pretty full on. So you know, we'd be working really, really hard at those day jobs, and we thought, okay, Nine Others is something that we can do on the side that kind of complements the day job. Um, and we just started doing one a month, and that kind of felt about right. We never wanted to. Um, like industrialize it almost, you know, because we had the day jobs, we you know we could pay our bills at home and all that sort of stuff, and we could run the Nine Others dinners. Now each Nine Others dinner, each person pays to come along to that dinner, so we run it on Ticket Tailor. They you know pay the cost of the ticket up front, and there's only 10 people there, and that simply covers the cost of the dinner, and that's it. And that's all we needed to do in the beginning, so that was fine. And you know, it sort of lent itself to that in the early days because we had these full-time, full-on jobs, but also we wanted to be focused on the quality of people that we got along and to kind of loosely curate who was there. So it was never about getting as many people there as possible and doing dozens of dinners with dozens of people every night of the week. You know, someone might want to go run that business, but that wasn't us. What we wanted to focus on was being useful, being the most useful, which meant, you know, curating who was there, getting people who are going to come along and contribute and share their challenges and help the others. So we thought, you know, one a month is about right. And we still do that. And then how we, you know, I mean, how we pay the bills now. You know, I was with that investor for 4 years. And then I left and I ran a co-working space. And then I've been involved in various other interesting projects. And I now do bits of investing into some startups. But it all comes from that network that we started and those that dinner that we started back in 2011. So the dinners kind of cover their costs, they kind of wash their face, and that's all fine. But lots of other interesting things, um, you know, come from that network of people.
I was going to ask you actually, but you kind of covered it, about almost like, in the nicest possible sense, quality control, because you could end up with the same people wanting to book on everything. Or I don't know if you've met people in business, I've met many where they seem to enjoy the training and the turning up and the networking, but actually the nitty gritty, the business isn't actually there at
Mhm.
all. So, I mean, you know, loosely talk to us about how do you create to make sure you have variety of guests in your 10 around the table, um, and you know, variety in terms of size of business, different type of business, different type of person. And you know, are there any no-nos, not naming any names of course, but are there any red flags for you?
Gosh, yes, yes to all of those things, and I'd love to unpick it a lot. So, I mean, the most important thing, like I said before, is that we want Nine Others to be useful. So if you think, okay, so how do we make this useful? Well, you've got to find people that are going to come along and be helpful and going to contribute. And then it's like, okay, so what does that mean? Well, then you got to think, okay, so we might have to filter or at least, check those people out to see whether we think they're going to come along and contribute. And because we had day jobs and because there are only 10 seats at the dinner, and I'm one of them, and Katie, my co-founder, is the other one, we weren't in a massive rush to get bums on seats. So we knew we could kind of curate um and almost, make sure that the right kind of people were there for what we wanted to do. So we would meet everybody before they came to the Nine Others dinners. And part of this was the day job, but if and so we had this in mind that we want it to be useful, so we want people who are going to come along and contribute. And as you say, we've all been to those kind of events where you meet someone and it's just, oh, they're just there for what they can take, right? You're in a networking event and they're looking over your shoulder to see if there's any more interesting to talk to, or they just want to talk to you for some immediate quick win piece of information or whatever. And you can get a gut sense for that, right? So we would meet lots of people for our day jobs and talk about Nine Others and such like. And if we got the sense that somebody was gonna, you know, they were going to come along, they were going to share their challenge, they were going to be, kind of vulnerable in front of the others, but they were also going to be able to contribute and help the others with their challenges, then yeah, sure, okay, we'd tell them a bit about Nine Others. And we have this completely arbitrary rule, which is our 65% rule. And if we thought in our gut, 65%, we were 65% or more sure that the person was going to come along, contribute, and all the rest of it, then we'd give them an invite. And then, of course, they have to look at the invite. They have to, read the blurb to see whether that clicks with them afterwards. And then they've got to click buy a ticket. And then, in the beginning, the tickets were like, 20, £25. It was like sandwiches, and I would get a few bottles of wine on the way. It's never about being some sort of, fine dining experience, but they would have to put their hand in their pocket and commit and contribute to buying a ticket. And then they'd show up on the night. And if they were willing to kind of jump through those hoops, then chances are they're going to be good at the dinner and they're going to contribute and they're going to, be useful to the others and they're going to get something out of it. So those were the kind of things that sort of made sense to us. And in terms of red flags, yeah, I mean, again, it's about the people that you just get a sense that they're just there for what they can take out of a situation. So if we got that sense, we'd not really mention Nine Others to them, and they wouldn't get an invite. And that was that. And it may just be, sometimes people just aren't in the right state for that kind of thing. We've all been in situations where it's like, oh my God, I need something right now. And you're just there for what you can maybe take out of it. And, maybe as the months pass or, different situations happen, then that same person might be in a different state. So it might work out for them. So those sorts of things.
I
And then I think the last thing just to say as well was like the whole point of Nine Others is to try and solve these business challenges and to contribute to trying to help the other people. So in general, the kind of people that would not get the most use out of it are either, wannabe entrepreneurs that are so early they haven't even done anything about their idea, right? So they've got an idea, but it's all theoretical. Um, there's, even with Nine Others, we knew that, okay, we've had this idea, right? How do we test it? Well, let's just host a dinner, right? So people to get the most out of Nine Others have to be coming up against the challenges. So they have to have, done something and started and they're on their way to building their business or they're well through it. The people who are maybe working at big corporates, they think entrepreneurship is all very trendy and they've got an idea. I mean, the advice is always, well, what can you do to sort of validate that right now? And they just wouldn't get the most out of Nine Others. So those kind of people just wouldn't get the most out of it, so they don't come along.
the reason I asked you that, Matthew, is because when I started my business in 2008, I knew I was going to be made redundant. So I started in 2008, was made redundant in 2009. That I think the most shocking thing that I found being in business, as a woman in business who then had four children I was responsible for, they're all grown up now. I was always amazed by how often I was dissed by certain people in the business community because I was a consultant. My goals in business were quite modest. So my goal back then was, yeah, if I could make 50,000 turnover a year, that would give me enough profit. I'd cover my what I was earning before, and I'd be able to pay for my laptop, my phone, and my car. And that's how basic.
Hmm.
I'd had a goal, but it was that basic. And I remember being told things like, I didn't have a proper business because I wasn't wanting to scale up. It would never make £1 million turnover. I remember the day I made six figures, I was terrified that I could never have another year like that because there wouldn't be enough hours in the day. But over the time, I've come to realize I'm as much of an entrepreneur as anybody else. My goals are just different. So I wondered if you could rate in terms of value, or whether someone is seen as more suitable because they want a scale up business, say something like what three words might be one, whereas somebody else might have a more modest goal like me, which is just to, I hate the term, but people often use it, to have a lifestyle business that works around. Do you have any quality control around that?
Not specifically. It's like it all comes back to the person. Again, if they're going to come along and they're going to contribute, and they actually it would be useful for them to share a challenge and hear some of the feedback, then what they happen to be doing right now isn't really the thing. And I think this might answer like why that always kind of felt right to us, right? So, to invite the person, as long as they're in some sort of business coming up against the challenges and it can be useful and they want to contribute to the others, kind of that was like number one. So because of that, it never felt right to sort of dissect it any more than that. Because I know there are other networking groups where you've got to have a certain turnover or you've got to be in a certain sector and intuitively that just sort of didn't feel right to us, from day one. And then it sometimes it takes me a while anyway to kind of figure out what that sort of intuition and what that gut reaction is sort of saying. But how that sort of came about was in early 2012, so it was quite early days. It must have been about the, I don't know, fifth or sixth dinner, if that. I know exactly where it was. It was in a cafe on Old Street, and it was called Look Mum No Hands, which is like it's a bicycle shop, Look Mum No Hands, and they have a cafe as well. Anyway, um, I remember very, very clearly it was in that place, and it was the fourth or the fifth dinner. And as was usual, we had a bunch of tech startups around the table because that's kind of the world we were in. So that was all fine. And like I say, before this, people had said, "Oh, are you going to theme them? Are you going to do, games focused ones, mobile focused ones, whatever?" And it just didn't feel right to us. And at this particular dinner, most of them around the table were these techies, with their apps and websites and whatnot. And their challenges were typically, um, you know, technological ones, I think, from memory. But there was one guy there, and coincidentally, I saw him last week. And he's called Dan, and he started a coffee shop called Coco di Mama on Fleet Street, opposite Goldman Sachs. Absolute fantastic success. Katie and I met him when he had that one coffee shop, and we'd go there because he opened the door early for us when we wanted to go in before they really opened. Anyway, so we got to know Dan, and he had that one coffee shop. He came to that nine others dinner. He ended up with like 20 odd. He sold them. He's now doing an amazing uh, bakery and restaurant in London. But the point is, he came along and he's like running a coffee shop, and there's all these techies, and he was the best value person at that dinner because he listened to them, and then he said, "Hang on a minute, all you're on about here is the challenges that you're facing. It all boils down to getting money in and out. So for him, it's about getting money in the till, and it's about getting people in and out. It's about getting people in and lining up out of his door." And it just like cut through all of the BS, or that the kind of techies were saying, "Oh, I can't do this till I have this particular engineer. I can't do that because of this particular technology." And Dan was like, that's a load of rubbish. What you're talking about here is getting money in and out and people in and out. And he was just brilliant. And there he was running, one coffee shop, soon to be 20 odd coffee shops. And afterwards, Katie and I were just buzzing and we were like, that's the reason why we don't like theme them or have these sector focuses, or you got to be running this type of business or that type of business or this type of ambition and that type of ambition. Um, was down at that dinner. If that answers the point.
No, no, that answers perfectly. But I am going to ask you another question. Is London the centre of the universe when it comes to business?
God no. And I mean, look, I live just outside London. I love it. I grew up in a farm in the middle of nowhere up in Northumberland. I always wanted to be here. I love the buzz and, diverse nature of London and all its different cultures and bits and bobs. Um, so yeah, from me, I mean, I do love it. Is it the center? No. And I mean, you're not going to get away from it being a major hub, as there are other major hubs in the world. Um, but I think a bit of it sort of gets towards how Nine Others became global as well. And I think there should be more of this. It's like, okay, so London is great, it's a great center and everything, but it's not the be all and end all. And if you don't happen to be here, or you don't want to be here, or you're in somewhere, don't use it as an excuse. And what we saw throughout 2012, again, just in the second year of Nine Others, was that people actually they were crisscrossing the world anyway. We're all obviously connected, um, and you can have customers and suppliers and employees and all the rest, and investors and all the rest of it all around the world. And the people who were coming to the dinners that we would just happen to be doing in London at the time, had these connections all around the world. And on a brainstorming day, Katie and I were kind of thinking, what would scale with Nine Others look like? And like I said before, we didn't want to do dozens of dinners with dozens of people, every night of the week. But we thought maybe this might work in other cities, and maybe there are other people in other cities like us that want to do these kind of dinners. And if we did have that network around the world, then it would be pretty cool if, someone from one place could go to the next place and they would kind of hit the ground running because we had a network, or they could connect with people. So I suppose that's what kind of made us start to think about doing Nine Others in other cities. And yeah, look, London is a hub, but we've done them all around the world and in some pretty obscure, pretty remarkable places, because there are people there who are, starting up, doing their business, getting customers, coming up against pretty much the same challenges that we see everywhere else.
I love that, Matthew, because I've found also I don't feel this. I think small business owners particularly gravitate towards each other no matter where you are in the world.
Mhm.
I travel a lot, and I can always guarantee it's almost a joke with me and my husband how long it'll be before I end up having a chat with another small business owner just because I've said something like, "Is this your business?"
Mm.
And it'll lead on to a discussion. And I've done that in Poland, Italy, France, America, all across the UK. I often share those stories because you're quite right. We have the same challenges, we have the same moments of celebration, we have the same gripes, the same moans, but also the same joys. So, where right now can people access Nine Others?
So, well, we've run it in about 50 cities all around the world. And the people that we have, the kind of local hosts who run it in all of those different places all around towns and cities all around the world. And some of them are a bit pop up, some of them we haven't done in a while, some of them are much more regularly. I was looking the other day, and the guys in Manchester have run it for 10 years this year, and I mean it's just remarkable. I mean, I can't believe it. I love it. But they are the equivalent to Katie and myself, and they do it in Manchester, and they bring those people together a few times a year, and try to help each other out. And there's some wonderful things come from that network. It's just started. We just started doing them in Cheltenham, which again, like I never thought I'd be doing none of those dinners in Cheltenham, but someone from there came to a London dinner, enjoyed it, got a lot out of it, and thought actually there's a bit of a cluster around Cheltenham, particularly around, cybersecurity and all that sort of stuff. Maybe it might work over there. So they're just organizing their second one. So it kind of works. It kind of works wherever you want to, wherever the people are that want to put it together. Um, and when we thought, would nine others work in other cities? uh, uh, Katie said, right, let's do 12 cities in the next 12 months. And it was like, oh geez, that was back in 2012. That seemed like a massive, massive goal, but an achievable one. And so what we did first was kind of to your earlier question, like we wrote down all the main business hubs around the world that we thought. So we thought obviously San Francisco, New York, Singapore, Sydney, all these kind of big, big cities. And it didn't go like that at all. It kind of went where the people took it. And we were in we were in Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea before we were in San Francisco.
I
And
love
the
that.
first place we had an overseas dinner was in Barcelona. And again, it's kind of one of these sort of happy accidents. We talked to three people in a row in Barcelona because we said like we want to do these nine others in other cities. If you know someone, introduce us. And we talked to three different people in a row in Barcelona who we thought might want to do it. And the first two just didn't click with them. Like the first one was like, oh, Barcelona's too big. You'll never get any attention on it. No one will come along to this. The second one was like, no, 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 Barcelona's too small. Everybody always knows each other. It'll not cut through. People won't want to do this separately. But then the third person we talked to, Elisa, she was like, we hardly had to say anything, and she just got it. And she's like, I could do this, and I could host it here. I could invite these couple of people. They knew other people to invite, and she just ran with it. And we hardly had said anything. So where can people get nine others? Well, where we are at the minute and where we've been, but also I think it works. I think it
Mm,
works wherever someone wants to put it together. It is a bit of work. It does take a bit of work. You have got to organize it. You have got to find somewhere. You have got to invite people and run it. But we support as much as we can from here. But it works. We've had them in Karachi, we've had them in like Papua New Guinea, like I say, we've had them in Yemen, because there are people there running businesses and they're coming up against the money in the till problem and the people in and out problem, just the same as we are.
cool. What about Swindon or Bristol or Bath, as she says? Because Swindon, okay, I live in Swindon. I don't know if you've ever been to Swindon, Matthew, but it's the second most economically active urban area in the southwest after Bristol,
Yeah,
and gets ignored. It's seen as very vanilla. So it's got an amazingly diverse business community. And
yeah.
I run events and never struggle to fill them. I'm not talking about huge events. I'm not talking about 100 people in the room. I'm talking about 20 or 30 people. That's easy to do. That's falling off a log. Um, Bath is another city I know very, very well. Actually, really limited opportunities
Mhm.
for networking with people who are really engaged because there's no newspaper there anymore. There's a
Uh,
couple of magazines. So I know the Southwest well. Loads of opportunities. We should have a talk outside of this.
I'd love to. I'd love to. I mean, look, the more of this sort of stuff, the better,
Yeah.
right? I always say the more of this sort of stuff, the better. But if you or another host, whoever's listening, kind of wants to do this in a nine others way, then brilliant. Let's talk. We've got 10 golden rules that make it a nine others dinner. We've got a bit of a, nine others in a box. Here's how it runs. You get a lot of support from me back here. But yeah, you do have to get out there and make it happen as well. And we found some things work, some things don't work, and all the rest of it. The the challenge that some people have, I guess, and this is going back to like filtering as to who comes and who doesn't, and I think this is for whether it clicks with the host or whether it doesn't, is is like it does take a bit of work, and there won't be an immediate payoff. It's like these sorts of things. It's a bit like compounding. It's a bit like compounding interest, I think. You're compounding relationships, you're compounding goodwill. And if you look at a compounding of interest graph, it goes along like this and nothing happens for a long time. And then it kicks in and then, interesting things start to happen. And like I say, nothing like immediately came back to Katie and myself in the first few years of running this. it was good and it was interesting and we were connecting lots of good people, and that was the point. And if it only did that, then great. We get to go to dinner once a month with some amazing, interesting folks. But it's a bit weird if we keep doing this and nothing happens and nothing comes back. Um, and it has, and I've been involved in all sorts of interesting projects and the investment stuff and all the rest of it, and it can probably all be traced to a Nine Others dinner somehow.
But the thing is, Matthew, you and Katie, you created, probably without realizing it, a really classic public relations strategy through an event and through
Okay.
bringing people together. That's what public relations is. People often
Mm,
come to me because I'm a journalist. They'll say, "Oh, it's about dealing with the media." Well, it is for some people. But for some people, it's another form of public relations and events. It could be public speaking. It could be running a YouTube channel. It could be running a podcast, none of which generates income in the short to medium term, usually, but leads to things that you can't possibly predict. There's an element, I think, of trust in the process, Matthew.
yes, yes, and you have to, and that's it's kind of like at the edges. I always like to think of things at the extreme edges of one spectrum or another. And, I did undergraduate computer science. I was doing lots of maths and programming and all the rest of it, and that's all fine. And I love the tech side of things. But then I think Nine Others is one of the most low tech, offline, non-scalable, you can't predict things that are going to happen. You can't run an algorithm on it particularly. It's one of the most non-tech things out there. And yeah, you're right. You've got to trust the process. Because if I, in December 2011, if I tried to figure out what would happen with who when and try to run it on a spreadsheet, I mean, you wouldn't last 5 minutes. But I just thought if we keep doing this, then good stuff will come from it. And yeah, it is about trusting the process, I guess. Yeah.
I think that anyone listening to this or watching this will start to understand I always call it the knitting yogurt factor in PR. Sometimes it can feel like there's no immediate return on investment, probably won't work with somebody who's purely transactional and it's got to, tick the right ROI box next week. But actually, the value over time by putting the work in could be immeasurable to anyone in
And
business.
it's almost like, I mean, I don't know, we'll see how it turns out, but two things spring to mind there. Like one, a friend of mine talks about that there's just incredible value in the inefficiencies. Okay, let's have the techie stuff and try to be as efficient as possible in all sorts of things. But if you can, I don't know, I'd never want to like, I don't know, not have the messiness of the Nine Others dinner and the unpredictability of the emotions of what someone's going to share and not, and all this kind of stuff. And there's remarkable value in those sorts of inefficiencies and kind of human things. Is super super interesting.
Matthew, you and I could talk all day. Unfortunately, we have run out of time for this one. So, how can people find you or find out about Nine Others themselves?
Well, you can look at nineothers.com, number nineothers.com. I'm Matthew at nineothers.com if people want to email. I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn as well.
Thank you for joining us on Real PR. I hope you've enjoyed my chat with Matthew today. I think you will have got loads of value on that. Do connect with him, do have a look at the website. And if you want to find me, it's scottmedia.uk. And I've got a Facebook group, Fiona Scott's PR Tribe. Just apply to join, it's totally free. Loads of journalists sit in there, they share their requests. I share lots of hints and tips. I do sell my stuff, let's be honest, but don't we all? See you soon.